Hello there. The concept of male chauvinism is a long-standing social phenomenon that reflects gender disparity and inequality within society. In more traditional families, this mentality persists due to outdated beliefs and values that are no longer aligned with modern times or the principles of gender equality. Male chauvinism manifests in various aspects of daily life. For example, there is often a preference for sons over daughters in education and development, as well as in the distribution of assets and the pressure on daughters to marry for the sake of family honor. Today's story is a case in point. The incident took place in Mitcham, a district in South London, England. Mitcham is known for its picturesque countryside, where the animal slaughter and textile industries have thrived. Additionally, this area has many residential zones and modern infrastructure, making it a popular destination for foreign immigrants to live and work. The main character in this story is Banaz, who was born into a Kurdish tribe in Iraq. Banaz was the fourth child in a family of 6 siblings, including 3 older sisters, 1 younger sister, and 1 younger brother. Her father worked as a laborer, while her mother was a homemaker. When Banaz was 10 years old due to the war, the entire family fled Iraq and migrated to England, settling in Mitcham, South London. To make ends meet, her family had to work in manufacturing plants, and Banaz and her sisters were forced to leave school early to help support the family. On a day in January 2006, Banaz suddenly disappeared while taking an afternoon nap at home, leaving everyone shocked and terrified. Despite the police searching everywhere, no one knew where she had gone or what had happened that day. So what exactly happened? The strange disappearance. Wednesday, January 25, 2006, at 9 a.m., a frantic man rushed into the police station in Mitcham to report a missing person. He said that his girlfriend had gone missing. The man, Ramat, 23 years old, was a factory worker. He had met Banaz the previous summer, and the two had gotten along very well, frequently texting each other every day. They were planning to get married soon, but on January 24th, his girlfriend suddenly disappeared. Ramat had texted and called her, but received no response. Fearing for Banaz's safety, he immediately went to the police station to file a report. At that time, Banaz was 21 years old, working in a textile factory and living with her parents and 2 younger siblings. Her 3 older sisters had left home long ago to live independently. Banaz lived in a very traditional family. When she was just 5 years old, her mother subjected her to a clitoridectomy, an ancient and cruel ritual believed to preserve family honor. All of Banaz's sisters had to undergo this ritual as well. In this family, the girls were always looked down upon and had no voice. Banaz's father, Mahmoud, was a strict and stern middle-aged man, so no one in the family dared to disobey his orders. Mahmoud was highly chauvinistic, always showing a cold attitude towards his daughters, and often resorted to corporal punishment to resolve issues. He also imposed strict rules on how his daughters dressed, forbidding them from wearing patterned clothes or painting their nails. He insisted that whether at home or outside, his daughters must never look a man in the eye, as he believed this to be a sign of promiscuity. Under his strict upbringing, all 5 daughters were extremely fearful. Alongside Banaz's family, her uncle Ari's family had also migrated to England. In Banaz's eyes, although her father was the unquestioned authority in their home, the true head of the family was her uncle Ari, who was the wealthiest among them. Ari was also a hot-tempered man who favored using violence to resolve issues and took a particular interest in the marriages of his 5 nieces. Mahmoud always followed his younger brother's lead and allowed Ari to make decisions for the family. After receiving the report of Banaz's disappearance, the police quickly went to her home. The area was predominantly inhabited by Iraqi immigrants, with families living close to each other and most having private gardens. When questioned, Banaz's father appeared surprised, saying that he had no knowledge of his daughter's disappearance. He speculated that she might be out with friends and had accidentally turned off her phone, making her unreachable. He also claimed that his family was harmonious and that his children respected him, so there had never been any sudden disappearances before. Banaz's uncle also told the police that his niece had always had a good relationship with the family. Although she sometimes stayed overnight at a friend's house, there were no conflicts with anyone, making it unlikely that she would disappear for no reason. When the police spoke to Banaz's mother, she did not seem worried, simply believing that her daughter was out having fun and even suggesting that the police were overreacting. When the police requested to search the house, Banaz's uncle readily agreed. However, after thoroughly inspecting every corner of the house, the police found nothing unusual. The police continued to gather information from Banaz's close friend, who revealed that she hadn't seen Banaz in years. Since her marriage, they had lost touch. She added that Banaz's father was very strict and didn't allow her to socialize freely, so they never hung out together, only occasionally exchanging a few messages. The last time they chatted via text was a month ago, but it was mostly about work. After that, they lost contact and the friend had no idea where Banaz had gone. The police then went to the textile factory where Banaz worked to inquire further. Her colleagues mentioned that Banaz hadn't shown up for work in the past few days, and no one knew why. They had only heard that she was busy with something at home. The factory owner told the police that Banaz was a diligent and dedicated employee, but recently she had abruptly resigned. However, in an effort to keep her, the factory had granted her a few days of leave to reconsider her decision. Banaz did not disclose the reason for quitting, suggesting she might have had something difficult to share. As the police reviewed missing person reports and recent case files, they discovered that Banaz had filed 2 reports in the past. On December 2, 2005, Banaz overheard a conversation between her parents, where she learned that her father and uncle had decided to eliminate her and her boyfriend. After hearing this, Banaz became extremely frightened, realizing that her father truly intended to kill her. For the next few days, she lived in constant fear, not knowing what would happen next. After careful consideration, Banaz decided to write a letter to the police reporting the situation. In the letter, she wrote, "They are ready to kill me and my boyfriend. Every day when I wake up, I don't know what will happen. I live in despair, not knowing when I will lose my life." However, when the police received the letter, they didn't take it seriously, dismissing it as a malicious prank and believing that these family disputes could resolve themselves. But 2 weeks later, Banaz reported another incident, recounting how one day her father had taken her to her grandmother's house. Strangely, he had bought several bottles of brandy, which was out of character for him. During the meal, her father deliberately sent her grandmother out of the room, spoke at length, and kept urging her to drink. Banaz sensed that her father was about to make a move, as he kept wearing a pair of white gloves and didn't remove them even while eating, likely to avoid leaving fingerprints on the utensils. The more she thought about it, the more terrified she became, unable to take her eyes off his gloves. Sensing her fear, her father scolded her to keep her head down, leaving Banaz in a state of utter panic, desperate to leave immediately. However, to avoid arousing suspicion, she tried to change the subject. Banaz waited for an opportunity to get up and head for the door, but when she grabbed the handle, she found it was locked tight. All the windows in the room were also securely locked. In a moment of desperation, she smashed a window with her hand and climbed out. She then ran frantically down the street, not daring to look back until she reached a convenience store. By then, Banaz's hand was deeply cut by the glass, bleeding profusely. The store clerk quickly bandaged her wound and called the police. When they arrived, Banaz, in a highly agitated state, insisted that her father was trying to kill her. However, the police couldn't comprehend her fear. They assumed no parent would harm their child and suspected Banaz might be paranoid, so they didn't believe her. Banaz continued to assert that she was telling the truth and mentioned that after this incident, she had nowhere to go. Despite this, the police classified it as a self-inflicted injury and contacted Banaz's father. After several negotiations, they arranged to meet at a McDonald's. In front of the police, Banaz's father not only apologized to her, but also promised that such an incident would never happen again. He even whispered to his daughter that he had acted on Uncle Ari's advice. Seeing her father's apparent sincerity, Banaz forgave him and went home with him. But 1 month later, Banaz disappeared. According to the police investigation, when Banaz was 16, she was forced into marriage with an Iraqi man, 10 years her senior, arranged by her father and uncle. This man was unattractive, illiterate, conservative, and had an odd temperament. Banaz endured domestic violence for 2 years until the marriage ended, allowing her to return to her family. In need of money, Banaz worked at a local textile factory where she met her current boyfriend, Ramat. They quickly connected and began dating shortly thereafter. However, they knew they had to keep their relationship a secret from Banaz's father, who would stop at nothing to separate them if he found out. So they could only meet in secret or communicate via text messages. But eventually, the secret got out. One day they were seen embracing at a train station by an acquaintance, and the news quickly reached Banaz's father. When Banaz's father found out, he was furious and demanded that they break up. Her uncle was even more enraged, forbidding Banaz from leaving the house and threatening to send both her and Rahmat to hell for their shameless behavior. After Banaz's disappearance, the police sought out Rahmat for more details. Rahmat recounted that ever since their relationship was discovered, Banaz's uncle frequently followed him, even carrying a weapon with the intent to harm him. He noticed that her family had a strong controlling nature and adhered strictly to arranged marriages. Banaz had often complained about her stifling family and her desire to escape. When Banaz first moved to Mitcham, her oldest and second sisters were forced into marriages with much older men chosen by their father and uncle. Witnessing her sisters' unhappy marriages, Banaz's third sister, Bekhal, began to rebel against their father. She stopped wearing traditional clothing and started experimenting with more revealing outfits. Banaz admired Bekhal's courage, as she was a woman with independent thoughts. But to their father, such actions were seen as foolish and disgraceful, bringing shame to the family. As a result, he frequently beat Bekhal, nearly killing her on several occasions. Banaz saw everything but was too afraid to defend her sister, fearing she might also be beaten to death. Unable to endure it any longer, Bekhal decided to leave home and never return. After Bekhal left, Mahmoud turned his attention to Banaz, eager to marry her off quickly, as keeping a daughter at home was seen as a financial burden. Thus, she too was not spared from the fate of being forced into a marriage with someone she did not love. Although she later divorced, Banaz still couldn't escape her father's control. Rahmat suspected that Banaz's disappearance was related to family honor and believed that her uncle and father had harmed her. The police then summoned both men for questioning. Mahmoud claimed that since the family moved to England, he had worked hard to provide them with a good life. He insisted that he had always been generous with his daughters and had not forced any marriages. He also asserted that he would never harm his daughter. Banaz's uncle also said that since she had divorced and found a new boyfriend, the whole family had been happy for her. They didn't interfere in what Banaz did or where she went, and her disappearance had nothing to do with them. He speculated that Banaz might have run away with Rahmat and faked her disappearance to escape her family. During the interrogation, both men were indifferent to Banaz, as if her disappearance was unimportant and not worth their concern. More notably, everything they said contradicted the police's findings. Although there was no concrete evidence to arrest them, the police sensed that something was wrong with this family. They continued to question neighbors around Banaz's home for clues, but everyone remained silent, claiming to know nothing about her disappearance or her family's situation. Key clues. During the investigation, Banaz's third sister, Bekhal, provided the police with a crucial lead. She recounted that a year before the incident, she had secretly met her sister Banaz with the help of a friend. Before that, the two sisters had not seen each other for 3 years. During their meeting, Banaz revealed that her marriage was not out of love, but entirely arranged by their father and uncle. Before their marriage, Banaz's ex-husband frequently visited her home, pretending to be a guest while actually seeking opportunities to harass her. Banaz told her father about this, but he scolded her and forced her to accept it. Her father deliberately created situations where they would be alone together. Banaz was terrified but didn't dare tell anyone else, fearing her father's anger. Once her father caught Banaz being assaulted by this man, but instead of intervening, he tacitly approved. From then on, the man became bolder and eventually assaulted Banaz. When her father found out, he wasn't angry. Instead, he insisted that she marry the man because she had lost her virginity. If she didn't marry him, she would be ridiculed by society. After they were married, Banaz had no rights whatsoever. She was even forced to hand-wash clothes because her husband forbade her from using the washing machine, believing that hand-washing would take longer and keep her from going out. At home, she was like a slave and wasn't allowed to call her husband by his name directly. Once, when guests were over, Banaz accidentally called her husband by his name and was brutally beaten. She always wanted a divorce, but her father and uncle prevented it. Finally, she couldn't endure it any longer and divorced him on her own, returning to live with her parents. But her ex-husband didn't leave her alone and often came to the house to harass and assault her. Bekhal also mentioned that when she first saw her sister after years apart, she noticed that Banaz was in terrible shape, thin, haggard, and covered in bruises from the abuse. Based on the current clues, The police suspected Banaz's ex-husband as a likely suspect. They continued to interrogate him, asking if he had used violence in their marriage. At this point, he became very agitated, even flipping a table over, and tersely said, "I don't know anything, and I have nothing to say." He then remained silent. However, after some time, he provided an alibi showing that he was not at the scene on the day of the incident. As the investigation reached a deadlock, Banaz's sister, Bekhal, came forward again, telling the police that since she provided the lead, she had been threatened multiple times and was followed whenever she went out. She suspected that these people were sent by her father and uncle. To ensure Bekhal's safety, the police provided her with temporary shelter and assigned secret protection. Additionally, Ramat provided the police with another lead. He mentioned that Banaz's 4 cousins were highly suspicious. While he and Banaz were dating, these 4 had followed them on several occasions. Once, they even came to Ramat's house to threaten him to stay away from Banaz. Even after Banaz went missing, Ramat still spotted 2 of them lurking in various secluded areas. Upon investigation, the police discovered that 2 of Banaz's cousins had left the UK after the incident and returned to Iraq. Based on the available clues, the police continued to suspect Banaz's family. To avoid tipping them off, they began monitoring the phone calls of the 4 cousins. Sure enough, they found that these individuals frequently called each other, boasting and occasionally revealing details about killing Banaz, mentioning that her body was buried underground near a refrigerator. With this initial evidence, the police arrested 2 of Banaz's cousins in the UK on charges of murder. However, it seemed the 2 had coordinated beforehand, as they remained silent regardless of the questions asked by the police. During their detention, they did not disclose any information. The search for the body. Despite being in custody, these 2 continued to boast to others about how they had killed Banaz, even revealing that her father and uncle were the masterminds. 3 months after the crime, the police, after reviewing numerous surveillance tapes from around Banaz's home, finally identified a suspicious taxi. This vehicle had stopped for a long time in front of Banaz's house on the day of the incident. When the police traced the license plate, they found that the car belonged to Amin, one of Banaz's 4 cousins. By tracking the taxi, the police discovered that on January 24th, the vehicle had traveled to Handsworth, 170 kilometers away from Mitcham. The police suspected that Banaz's body had been hidden there, so they deployed a helicopter to search the area where the taxi had stopped. After some time, they found an abandoned refrigerator in the backyard of a house. Given that Banaz's cousins had previously mentioned burying her body near a refrigerator, the police immediately went to the scene. Subsequently, the police arrested Banaz's father, Mahmoud, and her uncle Ari on charges of murder. Despite overwhelming evidence, the 2 steadfastly refused to confess. Mahmoud claimed that he had long abandoned outdated ideas under the influence of Western culture and would never commit such brutal acts. However, when the police placed the images of Banaz's body in front of him, the psychological pressure became too much for Mahmoud, and he was forced to admit to the crime. Meanwhile, although Ari admitted to his cruel actions, he still believed he was not wrong because Banaz's behavior was too disgraceful, and they acted to protect the family's honor. On the day of the crime, Mahmoud secretly contacted Banaz's 4 cousins while she was taking a nap. He lied, saying he was going to buy school supplies for his younger son, and took Banaz's mother and 2 younger siblings out of the house. Ari and the 4 cousins then entered the house and subjected Banaz to over 2 hours of assault and abuse, ultimately strangling her with a shoelace until she stopped breathing. They then placed her body in a suitcase and had Amin, one of the cousins, drive it to Handsworth for burial. After the police obtained the confessions from Banaz's cousins, a protest called Fight for Justice for Banaz began, with Banaz's image on banners, and many people stood up to demand justice for her. The outcome of the case. 1 year after the crime, the Central Criminal Court issued an official verdict. Mahmoud and Ari were convicted of murder after a 14-week trial. On June 11, 2007, Mahmoud was sentenced to 20 years in prison, Ari to 23 years, and Hama, one of Banaz's 4 cousins, was sentenced to 17 years. After receiving her daughter's body, Banaz's mother promised to handle her daughter's funeral arrangements. But shortly thereafter, the police discovered she had lied. She claimed the funeral would be held at the Central London Mosque, but on the day of the funeral, she went somewhere else to prevent the police from attending. After being pressured by the police, she finally revealed the new location of the funeral. However, when the police arrived, they found Banaz's body abandoned on a small road, and it was clear that her mother had no intention of holding a proper funeral for her. In the end, Banaz was only buried in a cemetery in Sutton after the police insisted. Even then, Banaz's mother was unwilling to pay for the burial plot. In June 2007, a memorial service for Banaz was voluntarily organized by the public at a church, but her mother still did not attend. Fortunately, a feminist organization stepped in and sponsored the purchase of a burial plot for her. 4 years after the crime, 2 of Banaz's cousins were extradited from Iraq back to the UK. In November of that year, the other 2 cousins were sentenced to 22 and 21 years in prison, respectively, for murder, without the possibility of parole. 2 years later, the final cousin was sentenced to 8 years in prison for illegally concealing the body. The tragedy continued. Even though the perpetrators were punished, the tragedy did not end there. Since Banaz's death, her boyfriend had lived in deep sorrow and severe depression. As a result, 10 years after the incident, he took his own life. Honor killings are not only brutal acts, but also a betrayal of human dignity and social justice. Unfortunately, such tragedies continue to occur, and that's the case for today. What do you think about this case? What are your thoughts on equality at this time? Please leave your comments below, and we'll continue the discussion. If you can, please like the video and subscribe to our channel to support us. Thank you very much.